There was once a woman whose voice roared louder than any beat, whose words made the toughest men in hip-hop pause and listen. Her name was Lelle Laws. The world would know her as Boss, the first ever female gangster rapper to sign with Def Jam. She wasn't just another artist, she was a force of nature wrapped in leather and Detroit grit. One moment, she was lighting up MTV screens with verses so sharp they could draw blood. The next, she was gone. No farewell tour, no dramatic exit, just silence. It was as if she'd vanished into thin air. What made her unforgettable wasn't glamour or fame. It was fearlessness. Boss didn't rap to impress. She rapped to tell the truth. And in an industry that worshipped image over honesty, that kind of truth came with a price. The same authenticity that built her legend would soon shatter her career. But before that fall came the fire. The rise of a woman who dared to challenge a man's world and change the sound of hip-hop forever. Stay with me, because what happened next isn't just a story about fame and loss. It's about how one woman's truth became both her crown and her curse. And by the end, you'll see why the world still whispers her name. Boss. Detroit, 1969. A city humming with rhythm and resilience. Stevie Wonder played on the radio, Diana Ross ruled the charts, and the pulse of Motown filled the streets. This was where Lelle Boss Laws was born, into a middle-class family that believed in education, discipline, and soul. Her mother, a teacher, preached structure. Her father spun Miles Davis and Aretha Franklin records until their melodies soaked into her bones. While other kids played outside, little Lelle sat by her window with a notebook, scribbling poems about everything she saw. The pain, the pride, the noise of the city that never stopped moving. She wasn't living the street life, but she understood it. Every heartbreak, every hustle, every quiet act of survival. Detroit gave her something priceless. Grit. The kind that doesn't break when life gets hard. The kind that turns words into weapons. By the time hip-hop began replacing Motown soul, she had already discovered her own rhythm. Truth wrapped in rhyme. Teachers called her too quiet, and classmates said she was too smart to rap. But Detroit steel was forged in her veins, and she was about to prove them all wrong. Because the girl who once wrote poems in her bedroom was destined to stand on stages across America and shake the very ground hip-hop stood on. But first, she had to leave Detroit. And what waited for her next was fire. When Lelle packed her bags and left Detroit for Houston in the late 80s, she stepped into another world entirely. Gone were the cool breezes of Motor City. Houston hit her with thick air, slow drawls, and a rhythm that moved like honey over thunder. The South was still shaping its sound, raw and unrefined, but bursting with pride and possibility. At first, she stood out, the smart, sharp girl from Detroit with a northern accent and a poet's tongue. But the moment she grabbed a mic, everything changed. Her voice had power, deep, deliberate, and dangerous. It demanded attention. Soon she met another Detroit transplant, DJ D, who shared her hunger for something bigger. Together, they became D and Boss, a duo unlike anything Houston had seen. Their music didn't glorify gangsters or fairy tales. It exposed the real heartbeat of America: poverty, racism, and survival. No gloss, no gimmicks, just truth over heavy bass lines. Their raw honesty started catching fire in the underground. Local DJs spun their tracks, crowds started memorizing her lyrics, and a new sound, bold and unapologetic, began to rise from the South. But for Boss, Houston was only the beginning. The fire in her lyrics was too big for one city, and soon she'd take that flame all the way to Los Angeles, where her destiny and her downfall were waiting. When Boss arrived in Los Angeles, it felt like destiny was finally answering her call. The city pulsed with ambition, palm trees, bright lights, and a music scene ready to explode. She signed with Def Jam West, one of the biggest labels in the game, and suddenly, the girl from Detroit wasn't just rapping about power, she was living it. Her debut album, Born Gangstaz, dropped in 1993, and the industry didn't know what hit it. Tracks like Deeper and Recipe of a Hoe weren't just songs, they were statements. Her voice was thunder, her delivery razor sharp. She didn't try to sound like anyone else, and that's what made her unforgettable. For the first time, a woman was matching the raw aggression of male rappers bar for bar, and doing it better. The album climbed the charts, interviews poured in, and critics hailed her as one of the fiercest voices in hip-hop. But behind the fierce lyrics and the confident scowl, something quieter was stirring. Exhaustion, pressure, and the weight of being the only woman expected to hold her ground in a man's world. Boss had reached the top, but fame has a habit of showing its darker side when the lights burn too bright, and what came next would shake her entire world. This part of her story is where everything changes. Success can be a beautiful illusion, shiny on the outside, hollow on the inside. For Boss, the girl who had fought her way from Detroit streets to Def Jam's golden halls, the illusion began to crack. After Born Gangstaz, the world expected more. Another hit, another headline, another version of the strong female rapper. But the industry wasn't kind to women who didn't fit a mold. Behind closed doors, Boss battled label politics, creative clashes, and an industry that prized image over integrity. The woman who once spoke with fire now faced silence. Projects got delayed, calls went unanswered, and suddenly, the same people who once praised her disappeared. Her health started to decline, and money grew tight. The strong, commanding voice that had once filled stages now echoed in hospitals and quiet rooms. But even in her weakest moments, Boss never stopped writing. Her words, once shouted over beats, now whispered from notebooks, softer but still strong. Life, it seemed, had tested her hardest, but she never lost her soul. Still, her story didn't end here. Because legends, they don't vanish, they evolve. And in the final chapter, you'll see how Boss's legacy, though dimmed by struggle, refused to die. So stay with me, because this last part will remind you why real strength never fades. In her later years, Boss faded from the spotlight, but not from the hearts of those who truly listened. The world had moved on to flashier trends, but her verses, raw, unfiltered, and honest, still echoed through the underground. She'd once rapped about survival, and in the end, that's exactly what she did. Her health battles grew tougher. Yet, even while facing dialysis and hospital stays, she never surrendered that spirit. Friends described her as calm but fierce, a woman who had seen too much to be bitter and lost too much to pretend. Fans online rediscovered her music, calling her the voice before its time, and truly, she was. In an era when female rappers were expected to play nice, Boss refused to be anyone but herself. Her songs weren't just rap. They were poetry dressed in grit, stories of resilience, womanhood, and truth. And though the fame didn't last, the influence did. Artists today still echo her bravery without even knowing whose fire they're carrying. So, as we close her story, ask yourself, What does success really mean? Is it fame, or the courage to be yourself, even when no one's watching? In the next part, we'll uncover how Boss's message continues to shape hip-hop, long after the music stopped. When we look back at Boss's journey, it's easy to see the fame, the fall, and the silence. But what truly lingers isn't her downfall. It's her message. Boss showed the world that authenticity is louder than any chart-topping hit. She stood tall in a world that wanted her to shrink, rapped about pain when others glorified power, and turned her struggles into anthems that still speak to anyone fighting to be heard. Her story isn't one of tragedy, it's one of truth. In every lyric, she told women, "You don't need permission to be powerful. You can be raw, emotional, angry, elegant, and still be real." She was never polished for perfection. She was polished by experience. That's what made her unforgettable. Even today, her music finds new ears through samples, shout-outs, and quiet mentions from artists who understand her impact. She might not have won all the awards, but she earned something far more lasting: respect. The Boss's life reminds us that elegance isn't just about grace, it's about grit, the kind that keeps you standing when the world looks away. This was the story of Boss, proof that elegance and power can coexist. Don't forget to subscribe for more.